Hello, this is Talking Europe on France 24. Today we're at the European Council's headquarters in Brussels with the foreign minister of one of the most talked about member states probably of recent months. I'm talking about Hungary. Viktor, thank you very much for being with us.
My pleasure. Thanks for the invitation.
Well, you're here as foreign minister, of course, of Hungary with a meeting of all of the other foreign ministers. I'd like to start just by talking about a foreign policy question which has been very present in recent days, about Venezuela. Several EU countries have now said that they will recognise Juan Guaido as the interim president of Venezuela. Do you agree with that?
Well, actually, we totally agree with the position put forward by the Spanish People's Party. You know, we are in EPP, European People's Party. Our chairman, both our Prime Minister, who is the chairman of the party, and chairman of the Spanish People's Party, just recently had a conversation on how things are moving forward or backwards, unfortunately, in Venezuela. They have totally agreed on the evaluation of the situation, and we line up to the position of the Spanish People's Party in this regard.
Currently, there isn't an EU position regarding Venezuela. The EU seen as perhaps being weak in its foreign policy because of this lack of a common position. Should there be a common EU position?
Well, look, we tried our best, I think, when we came together last time, and there were, I would say, there was kind of agreement on the long-term goals, you know. But how to get there was a matter of debate. That was the reason why no common position was put together after the last meeting.
Well, I'd like to move on then to much more Hungarian-focused matters, if I may, particularly Hungary-EU relations. They've been such a talking point for many months now. Now, just to remind our viewers, a few months ago, these Article 7 proceedings were launched, and we've got a little explainer on that. It's essentially a procedure used when a member state is, quote, at risk of breaching EU values. Launching Article 7, known as the nuclear option, it could end up with a member state concerned being stripped of its voting rights in the EU. For Hungary, the process sparked in September when there was more than two-thirds of the European Parliament voted in favour of this. With this explainer, here's Jenna Lee.
Created to deter member states to fall into anti-democratic habits, Article 7 of the Lisbon Treaty is a disciplinary procedure that punishes countries who don't adhere to the bloc's values. Values defined in a previous article that includes wording such as freedom, democracy, human rights and the rights of minorities. The European Parliament, Commission or a third of EU countries can propose to trigger Article 7. This when they judge that there's been a clear risk of a serious breach of EU values. It needs a two-thirds majority in Parliament and 4/5 in the EU Council to pass. Once triggered, the Council is in charge of verifying if the accused country is following its recommendations. If not, more voting takes place to kick off a sanctions phase, a key necessity being a unanimous vote in the European Council. In the end, a qualified majority in the EU Council, that's 55% of EU countries representing at least 65% of the EU population, is needed to trigger sanctions. Punishments that can include the suspension of voting rights, meaning that the targeted country won't be able to have its say on European decisions. The first country to be targeted with an Article 7 procedure was Poland in December 2017. Accused of undermining judicial independence, the Polish government is under EU scrutiny, but hasn't been stripped of its voting rights.
Okay, well, coming back to Hungarian Foreign Minister Péter Szijjarto, this Article 7 proceedings, it covers many issues, the report that was put forward in the Parliament. Hungarian government's use of EU funds, the new overtime laws, media, migration, rule of law. It all, though, hangs under sort of fundamental principles of EU membership. As we know, all member states sign up to respecting democratic values of the EU and upholding them. Of course, Hungary's government gets a right to reply. Your Prime Minister, Viktor Orban, wasn't present in the most recent European Parliament debate about this. So I'll put this question to you. Is your government committed to upholding these fundamental values?
We look at this issue as a political attack against Hungary. as a matter of revenge.
Revenge for what?
Revenge for our policy against migration, which was definitely harmful or painful, sorry, to the European bureaucrats here in Brussels. We made it very clear from the very beginning that we represent an anti-migration policy. We will never be a country of migrants, and we uphold our right to make a decision on our own whom we allow to enter the territory of our country and with whom we would like to live together. And on this basis, there has been a series of attacks launched against Hungary. Look, we were always open for debate. Our Prime Minister, I myself, we took part on all European Parliament debates so far, be it the plenary or the Libe committee. But, you know, it doesn't simply make sense anymore to take part on such kind of campaigning events, because it is obvious that these kind of debates have nothing to do with the reality. Look, the Sargentini report accused us in 69 points altogether. Out of
they were very varied as well. They weren't just about migration. You yourself mentioning migration there, Mr. Orban focusing on migration. I have read the reports. As I said, there's issues of the use of EU funds, which has nothing to do with migration. That's
why I want to say that there are 13 points out of the 69, 13, where we have already agreed upon with the Commission back in 2011, 2012. So, I mean, this raises the question whether it makes any sense in the future to come to an agreement during normal procedures with any European institutions, having in mind that another European institution would reopen that question based on a political will. Or there are 19 points there which are under in normal procedure under communication between the Commission and Hungary. And then 32 or 37 points, which are basically lies about my country, based on a prejudice and based on a political debate.
And you see that as an attempt to attack Hungary?
Absolutely, a political attack on Hungary. This is the background for all these debates in the European Parliament. We just simply don't want to take part in the campaigning events of the pro-migration forces. You know.
Why do you think, though, that the EU would attack one of its own member states?
Because we have been representing a very firm position on migration, which is a very firm anti-migration policy. This is the major debate. This is the major issue regarding the campaign which is ahead of us as a run-up to the election to the European Parliament. This has been the issue since summer 2015 in the European Union, whether Brussels have chosen the right path or a wrong path when it comes to tackling the migration issue, and we definitely represented a position which made it very clear that Brussels made bad decisions.
Now, you said that there are some points that your government agrees with, some are under discussion. Is your government then prepared to make policy changes in response to the report and the vote in the European Parliament? No. Because, of course, as we've seen in our report, the potential ramifications of Article 7 proceedings are very serious. Even if it doesn't get to that point, it's extremely symbolic and harmful to your government's image, isn't it?
Look, first of all, about policies made by government, the decision is only there for the Hungarian people. When this report was passed in the European Parliament, we were after 8.5 years of office, you know. So from 2010, we have been in office. There were 3 elections, 2010, 2014, 2018. Hungarian people made very clear decisions about the future of the country. They gave us 2/3 majority on all 3 occasions. So my question is, why Brussels does not consider Hungarian people mature enough to make decisions about their own future? You know, in history, we had some very, very bad occasions when external, let's say, interferences wanted to protect Hungarians from themselves. We don't want that anymore.
But it's interesting you say that Judith Sargentini did respond in the most recent Parliament debate at the end of January, saying, you know, that the Hungarian people deserve better. She said it's about protecting Hungarian and European taxpayers, but you still see it as an attack against Hungarians.
But why doesn't she leave it to
Those are her own words.
But why doesn't she leave it to the Hungarian people? On the last elections, April last year, less than a year ago, there was a record turnout on Hungarian elections, record turnout, 70%. And we, the governing party, received a record support, 49.6% of all of the votes. 3 continuous elections, 3 times 2/3 majority. So why don't we leave it to the Hungarian people to make a decision about their own future? Why does anyone think that Mrs. Sargentini could know it better, what the Hungarian people want, than the Hungarian people themselves?
Well, let's come to one of those central concerns of your government, migration. Now, when we had that recent debate in the EP about Hungary's Article 7 proceedings, it was an MEP, Tamás Deutsch, who spoke from your party Fidesz in favour of your government. Now, he made an accusation that we've actually heard from yourself as well. He said that the European Commission wants to legalise illegal migration. You've said this about the Vice President, Frans Timmermans, as well. That's quite the accusation. Can you explain that claim?
Yeah, of course. You know, when we made everything in order to protect our own border and to protect the border of the European Union, because we have external EU border and external Schengen border as well to be protected, then we received enormous number of attacks. When Hungarian policemen were attacked by illegal migrants from the territory of another country, then the European Parliament made a resolution that we shouldn't step up against these migrants in that way, and we should release that person who was leading the attack against the Hungarian policeman. Just going back to the
point of wanting to legalise illegal migration, what does that actually mean?
That means that, you know, European Union was absolutely in favour of the Global Compact on Migration, which was approved by the United Nations at the end of last year. And 9 EU member states didn't sign up either, which means that 1/3 of the EU member states did not vote in favour. I'm just saying this because we were accused by killing the European unanimity in this regard by going openly against the Global Compact on Migration, and at the end of the day there were 9 countries altogether. And Global Compact on Migration definitely legalizes illegal migration, because look at the text, there's basically a ban on making legal differentiation among migrants. This text does say nothing about those people and those countries. We just would like to live in peace on their own and just don't want to see the composition of their population to be changed. It says nothing about the security risks of migration, and it would like to take away a part of sovereignty of countries making their decisions regarding migration.
You agree with me, though, that it's not a legally binding text, the UN Compact on Migration?
Well, we have seen this movie already in Europe when the...
Is it or is it not a legally binding text, in your understanding?
It is definitely a legally binding text.
You believe it is?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's written in there.
Okay.
For us.
When this compact was going through, we spoke to the United Nations. Their experts believe it's not a legally binding text. That's obviously a point of disagreement.
Well, yeah, absolutely, we disagree there. Yeah,
you disagree.
Sure.
Just talking about migration into the EU, new figures showing that there's been a reduction of irregular migration by around 90% since the peak in 2015, when, of course, great numbers did enter your country, passing through, most of them on their way to other EU members. President Juncker, in his State of the Union speech in September, announced quite a lot of measures about migration, increasing Frontex border agents from 1,800 to 10,000 by 2020. The Commission strengthening the EU return directives. That means ability to return ineligible asylum seekers quickly, stop people from coming back. I would imagine that your government is in favour of those moves.
Look, there are 30 to 35 million people living in the southern and let's say east-south neighborhood, southeast neighborhood of Europe, who can make a decision, unfortunately, very easily to hit the road towards Europe based on their everyday situation.
Well, they could, but they're not doing that because the flows are down by 90%.
30 to 35 million. We are absolutely not closer to solution regarding the crisis in Syria and in Libya. There are more than 4 million migrants already on the territory of Turkey. The number of illegal migrants to be registered have grown to its twofold last year in Turkey. The number of illegal entrances in Spain significantly increased. Look at the political debate regarding the Minister of Interior of Italy, Mr. Salvini, who wanted to stop the migration on the maritime route. Frontex is not the solution. I mean, 10,000 Frontex agents will not stop the migration. We are defenseless. Still, European Union has not made the necessary and successful decisions in order to protect ourselves on the maritime route.
What would you propose? What would you propose as a member state?
That we have to make it very clear that the only way to come to Europe is the legal way. Because until
that would seem to fall under these recommendations from President Juncker in his State of the Union speech. Just looking at what he suggested.
Yeah, look at the current Brussels policy. That encourages people even to take the life hazard to get on board of ships of smugglers or NGOs and then come to Europe.
How does it encourage them? I really want to understand this point. How does it encourage them?
Because it suggests, the current Brussels policy suggests that if you come to Europe, you will be allowed to enter the territory of the European Union, you will be able to submit your request, and then definitely it will be impossible to send you back. This is the current European policy, unfortunately. This is what has been proved and shown by the figures.
All right, we don't have much time left, unfortunately. So many things to talk about with you. I would like to end with a word about Brexit. The supposed Brexit day steaming towards us, March 29th. Many voices saying that a no-deal exit by the UK does look ever more likely. It's been predicted that would be quite disastrous for the European Union as well. Do you believe it's going to happen?
Well, look, I wish I could tell you what would be happening. I have to tell you that we regret a lot the current situation. We regretted the outcome of the British referendum, although we always respected the rights of the British people, who have the exclusive right to make a decision about their own country. So we never judged the decision, but we regretted that for sure. Because losing the #2 economy of Europe and the #5 economy of the globe, which performs currently 14% of the economic performance of the European Union, is going to be challenging. Let's put it this way. So from my perspective, from our perspective, what I can tell you is that it would be much better to have an agreement than not having an agreement, because I'm looking about this issue from the perspective of the future. And I wish that the cooperation between UK and the remaining part of the European Union will be as free of obstacles as it is just possible.
And very briefly, some are suggesting that if the so-called Irish backstop is the problem here, then perhaps the EU should give way on that, essentially give up its solidarity with Ireland on that point. Would you support that?
Look, there is an agreement made by 27 countries, and if you want to change that, then you will need the consent of the 27 again. That's what I can tell you on that.
Right, Péter Szijjarto, Hungarian Foreign Minister, thank you very much for being our guest.
Thank you very much, I appreciate it.
And thank you very much for watching Talking Europe. We'll see you soon.
$500,000 families evicted from their homes, 80% of construction firms bankrupt, ghost towns, 30% unemployment, public sector wages reduced and taxes increased. Spain, shortly after the economic crisis of 2008. Today things look better, but what price has been paid?
We revisit Spain's economic crisis all this week on France 24.